Hello, everyone. My name is Renee Funk with the Leadership from the Heart series, together with my dear friend, Elizabeth Riley. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi, friend. It's been a while.
It's been a minute. And I am giddy with happiness and excitement to talk to our guest today, Kris Lindahl, CEO of Kris Lindahl Real Estate. And how do I even begin to introduce you? There's one word that comes to mind because I've always thought of you as this word, and that is pioneer. You are a pioneer in the real estate industry, a true marketer, which we have unbelievable respect that you are. And one of the other things we love about you is you are so focused on service. Welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I got big shoes to fill on this broadcast. If people think I'm the pioneer, I'm still learning.
But don't you
get to learn from you? So we're excited to have you as our guest and just soak it all in.
But one of the things that we first learned about you, and I think that you and Jeff and I first met back in Nashville at a real estate webmasters conference years ago, It is that you are so and have always been so focused on cascading out your collaboration and communicating and growing together with your fellow agent, which is very admirable. And so kudos to you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Kris, so let's dive in. It's been an interesting last few months. We've all in the world and in the world of real estate, and every single one of us have been faced with business adversity. Talk to us a little bit about yourself and what you've experienced.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much adversity that we face as business owners. 2020 has been a very difficult year for so many. We're based in the Twin Cities, so it's been even a bit more challenging than some of the other areas. But it's, I think the thing that I've learned over time that really starts to show up is true leadership, and it's, and for me, it's not true leadership from me. It's like watching everyone else in my organization, in our community, step up and lead the way that I always knew that they would. Because you find out so much about people during challenging times, right? It's when things are going up and things are well, we've watched it over the past several years where, people assemble what is perceived to be a team, which is just a loose collection of agents, no leadership. And typically the team leader has a big credit card limit and buys leads and upcharges them to agents. But everyone's looking around for like, who's leading this operation? And it's just chaos. And so when things get challenging, you can't get any sort of uniformity where everyone's going the same direction or like a all hands on deck, like here's what we need, here's what we have to do to power through this together.
Well, you've already mentioned team, and let's dive into that. Kris Lindahl Real Estate is set up in a different type of a model. Can you talk about the way your brokerage is set up and what are some of the differentiators that have been a game changer for you?
Yeah, of course. One of the big things in our model is our entire brokerage operates as a team, which is rare, right? I mean, there are definitely some very strong brokerages that operate as a team around the country. There, to my knowledge, aren't any in the Midwest. And so what happens for us is that we want to be focused on the consumer experience. And the reason why we have full control over the transaction is to be able to create a streamlined process that provides world-class experience to the consumer, which for traditional brokerages, and teams that don't have all that support in place, they can't control the experience to the consumer. So what you're seeing now is you're seeing a lot of brokerages that have a lot of resources and actually know that the world's changing. They know that the consumer deserves a better process, but they don't control that experience. They're dependent on the agents in their brokerage to create that experience. And so they can't change it. And the reason they can't change it is because a lot of these agents don't want to adopt the things that the broker is trying to roll out, right? Maybe it's too much. It's overwhelmed. It's just like constant, like, here's this, we're rolling out this, we're rolling out that. And there's this constant flux of things coming out. And it's so overwhelming for one individual agent to try to keep up with all of these things. And for us, we don't put that responsibility on the agent. Those are things that we handle behind the scenes so that when our agent shows up, they essentially have their own team behind them, making them look great, which now what also happens is now they're able to provide an experience and help the consumer with a seamless transaction, which leads to higher surveys, better reviews, and also more referrals, and building lifelong friendships and clients out of that same experience.
How does that affect the difference between an agent who might be very seasoned as compared to an agent who's newer or entry level into the industry? What advice do you have for agents at different points in their career within a model like yours?
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing because, tenure of real estate is such a hard thing to define, because you might have someone that enters real estate and they could be a year or 2 years in and they're doing a high level of production in a team environment like ours. And you might have someone that's 5, 10, 15 years out on their own that may have done a lot of production at the beginning, and they're watching that slowly slip away because they can't provide that level of service to the consumer. I had a conversation with an agent yesterday that's been in the industry for 19 years. And she said she was one of the top producers in her brokerage. And over years, it's like just slowly went down a little bit. And over the past 90 days, her business has dwindled down to next to nothing. And so because you got two parts. You have a brokerage that can't provide the tools and the systems to be able to go out and stay ahead of the competition. And it's just not feasible for the amount of revenue that individual agent solopreneur is bringing in. You couldn't add the things that we have in our company. You'd be operating in the red for several years. And I think that watching those things happen right now are like the things that I think a lot of us always knew were going to come. They just came to fruition a little sooner than I think a lot of us thought, with like the pandemic and the unrest and everything that's happening around our country. And it's, I do think, the thing that I think is really interesting about all of this is I think it comes down to being open-minded, right? I think as I look at people that have been in real estate for longer than some others, the longer that you're in it, the more closed-minded you become, and you're not really open to new things, new ways, new strategies, new tactics, new technology, things that can help bring more to your customers. You're accustomed to a certain way of doing business that you don't want to change those things. And I've seen that in so many industries throughout my life, where when things are good, that's usually when you're the most vulnerable, right? And I've seen it over and over and over again, that you start to get blinders on and you truly can't see that things are changing around you. And you're so used to your certain way because it's easy. You've got a rhythm, you've got a routine. You start going through that flow that you're not as open to something that's different. But what's starting to happen, and this is happening with a lot of the more innovative brokerages around the country, is that the people are starting to feel a lot more pain in their business, and they're starting to get more curious about things that are happening. And that's like what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot more conversations from agents that have been in the industry for quite some time, that are now starting to realize, like, hey, like maybe we should have a conversation about what it is that they're doing over there and how they're able to control that experience. Because, it's so about real estate. One thing, and both of you have probably seen this, is that leading brokerages or disruptive brokers or teams or agents, there are a lot of agents and people in the industry that have envy and jealousy, and they think things look a certain way, and they're all having conversations, and they're influenced by others in their brokerage, that they're having these conversations like, oh, it looks this way, it looks that way. Oh, they only do this, they only do that. And then when you step in and start to learn more about that organization, you're like, wow, like everyone from the outside told me it looked like this. And then when I stepped in, it looked like that. And so for us, like in our market, the thing that we hear over and over again is like, oh, Kris Lindahl Real Estate's compensation model and splits are terrible. And then when we have conversations with people that are on comparable splits, they're like, wow, we didn't realize all of those things were included for the same commission split that we're getting elsewhere. Our team leader or our broker said it was this, or they said it was that. And I think that's the thing that I've seen over and over again in our world, whether brand new agent or an experienced agent, to what you asked. I think the difference is the ones that are open-minded and have a growth mindset are the ones that land in the right places when they need to go there. And the ones that are closed-minded and really don't want any more and don't want any growth are the ones that are either close to being out of business or will be soon.
Let's talk. Can we talk about that progression a little bit though? Because what you're doing is pretty unique and interesting. And I mean, where did that start? Because there's so many different models. There's so many different ways to do business. We're all independent contractors, right? And that whole team mentality is awesome. But how do you get that to kind of come into that brokerage model that you're all actually on that same page? I mean, it's one thing to be a team within a brokerage or a team that's kind of self-sufficient doing their own little thing, but how did that work? Like, where did that start and where did that idea kind of come from? And how did you evolve to the point where you're actually productive and making it work in a whole brokerage model?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. I think those are really good points, actually. The one that I always come back to is the one that's more important than business, production, any of those things, is having people all on the same page, like believing the same thing, like in bringing people in your organization that fundamentally have the same values, whatever those are. And those values are like super unique to every organization. Mine are definitely not yours, and yours definitely aren't mine. They're all different. And I think the mistake that so many make is they try to copy someone else's, just like I did early on, right? I went online. I was like, oh, I need some mission statement, core values, and all. Like, you have to really dig. And it's the hardest exercise that you'll do is in business is to truly figure out what you stand for, truly figure out like what your people stand for, like what are those commonalities, what are you sharing, what's the vision, and the way that you get velocity in anything in life in a group thinking environment is when you have everyone on the same page and they all share the same values. And so it becomes less about, oh, like they're doing this kind of marketing or they're doing all these things over here or their structure is this or they what none of that stuff matters if you have people that are all on different pages and it's all disconnected and right. And you've got this, in most brokerages, you have this like hostile environment where everyone's looking out for themselves. No one wants to help others. Like, and you by creating that, you then have to stick to that. And so that even if you have a top producer, I think the biggest challenge, even if you have a top producer that doesn't follow those, you have to stay true to who you are, right? And so you see it so often, and I look through the years of some people that have made some amazing contributions in our company, and that we've had to make some difficult decisions with people that have financially contributed a lot to our company, but they weren't the right fit culturally, right? And to make those tough decisions to part ways with some of those individuals were some of the greatest breakthroughs of our organization, because it then showed everyone else that, hey, here's like, we're going to actually uphold the standards of our organization. Like, this is what we do. This is what we believe in. And then as it starts to get momentum, the people that want to enter your organization are attracted to what everyone stands and believes in. And they see it. Sometimes they see it in me. Sometimes they see it in an agent. Sometimes they see it in person. Sometimes it's on social media. I mean, it could be anywhere. But the thing is like the way that our company operates professionally is the same way that we operate personally because of the people that we hire. And because we're so selective in that process of who we bring into our organization. Could Kris Lindahl Real Estate have 10,000 agents in the next 60 days? Probably. Like, we probably could at this point. But we're so selective on who we bring in that we're never going to take our community for granted. And we're going to continue to uphold the standards and the values of our company to make sure that the right people are there. That's how you get ultimate velocity in anything, is by bringing in more people that all share the same things. And the reason we are where we are today and the reason why we're headed where we are in the future is 100% because of our people, like 100%. And it's not like this, like cliche, like, oh, it's about the people and the process and everyone's got the different, business books and, fundamentals and formats and structure that you can follow. But it's truly about the talent and the values of the people that we have in our organization. And every day. I mean, we had our weekly meeting this morning at 10, and then we had our leadership meeting right after that for an hour and a half. And so just having the opportunity to interact with so many highly talented people is the secret to success. And it's hard. It really is hard because it requires a lot from every person in the organization. It becomes a community that has to uphold that culture. It's not just about the team leader, the broker. I mean, this is a community effort where we're all pushing together toward and striving towards big goals. And but that's the piece for me that everyone underestimates about our company is the people on the community side of it. Everyone sees the branding, the marketing, all of that stuff, but none of that matters if you don't have the right people and you don't have people all on the same page.
Well, I love that collaborative spirit that y'all have. And what I love in talking to you and hearing you talk about your people, and I know it is cliche. We always talk about that, but Renee and I truly, truly believe it's the people you're surrounded by, right? We lift each other up. But just in talking to you, there's no ego involved. And I think with a lot of brokerages or a lot of models or even teams within models, there are egos involved. It's, well, I'm the top producer. I'm the team leader. I'm the broker. It's about me. And it's not about, and then what you're talking about is you're spreading that across the environment that you've created so that everybody succeeds at a high level. And that makes a difference.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I learned early on is there are a lot of people out there, and this isn't specific to real estate, that say one thing, but live a different way. Right. Yes. So like if I get on this video and I have these conversations and say all these words and do these things, but I show up everywhere else in the world and I don't live those same words, none of it matters. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's right now, especially.
Well, and Kris, let's dig into that, because one thing I know, and I know a lot of people who know of you and know you, see that you are authentic and live it every day. But I want to dig into, you talk about community and values. You are so much showing up for your community, and you always have, whether it's your community of realtors, whether it's your community in general. And I've also seen the way you've been standing up over the last 30, 60, 90 days. Talk to us about #BeGenerous, because this is something that is very important that everyone realizes. It's very high on your priority list to give back.
For sure. Yeah. It's for us, the big thing about all of this is that and exactly what I was just saying there is the words like don't mean anything. Like right. I'm like tired of seeing people's words. Like the action is what is way better. And the action right now, I've been watching everything that's happened from the pandemic to the civil unrest and the George Floyd tragedy and all of that stuff. I've seen a lot of people that just keep posting things. And I issued a statement that really challenged people. Like it's enough about like just saying we're going to do this or say we're going to do that or posting this or posting that. And it's time for people to take more action. And I think I think because of the era that we've lived in, we've got sort of caught up in that thinking that like posting something on social media means we're actually doing something, right? Like a lot of people think that like what we see on social media is real, right? And it's this produced version, and it's really easy to write something and it's very difficult to take action. It's super difficult. Just like it's really easy to make a financial donation to something, and it's super difficult to show up with your time because like you only have a certain amount of time, but most people can go on GoFundMe, and whether it's $5 or $100 or whatever it is, most people can give something to GoFundMe, but a lot of people choose not to give their time. You have people all over the internet, not even just 2020, but all over social media and internet that are calling for do this, do that, do this, do that. And there's all these arguments and everything else, and no one's doing anything. No one's actually taking any action. They're just having conversations and doing all these different things. And I think that's the piece that I've seen that we need more than anything else in the entire world is more leadership. We need more people to show up and step up and start doing things rather than just talking about them. And I think as a society, so many generations and people are so tired of people just saying they're going to do something,
Right.
whatever that is. And this is not political or business this is like our society as a whole. Like everyone's just saying things and no one's doing anything. And so to your point about be generous, when you show up and do something, it stands out because no one's doing anything. Everyone's just talking. And so for us, like, our 3 pillars of be generous are to give back time, treasures, and talents. Like giving back the talents and the time are the 2 hardest things. And then you add in, especially in our industry, very few people are stepping up and would do Zoom interviews like this and share everything about their organization, or in your case, interview people, or this took us 3 times to connect to get this together. Most people wouldn't be that persistent in putting something together like this, right? You look at the tens of thousands of real estate agents. How many agents are putting together, interviews and things like this to add value to others without asking for anything in return? Not very many, because most people don't want to give their time back. They might not say that, but their actions do.
Well, talk is cheap, right? I mean, that's exactly what it is. Talk is cheap. And that's what this whole conversation and so many before this, Renee and I have been just floored at the people that have offered or been willing eagerly, like you, to come on and visit with us and talk about leadership. And to us, it's such a gift. And it's you all just sharing those gifts with us as well, and the community and the industry as a whole. And so it's one of those things, it's actions speak louder than words. We all have opportunities to give back in our own way. And that's what makes us so unique and special. But I agree with you on social media. I've had to kind of not really watch or read or engage, because I'm like, that's not really how I've seen you lead. And I don't want to have judgment, right? Because everybody is affected and taking this, whatever the situation is, because there's been so many in 2020, right? I mean, whether it's, like you said, there's like all these different things that keep popping up. We're all dealing with it in our own way. So instead of judgmental or taking active action in a negative way, this is our opportunity to really show up and be there for each other and be kind and be generous. I love that hashtag, be generous. And we're always looking for ways to do that. And so I think by continuing to have these conversations, we're able to show people ways to do that. Because I've had a lot of people say, well, I don't even know what to do, right? Yeah. But like you said, just getting on a Zoom or having a conversation, you can learn a lot from others and get into action quickly instead of just being a deer in a headlight.
One thing that I would share that I saw early on in my journey throughout real estate is how much greed there is in agents, brokers, and teams. Like a lot of greed, like a ton of greed. And I saw that firsthand, over and over and over again, where a lot of people in real estate were really fortunate to do really well along the way, top producers, and they took it for granted. Like they didn't use their platform for greater good. They didn't really contribute back. Giving back to like some of these top producers that I saw was like writing $1,000 check to a school. And then it was like holding the check, like, look at this check that I just wrote the school. And it never felt right to me. And when I saw that and I watched it, I'm like, there's such an opportunity for a different style of leadership, a way to give back to the community. And I think like true generosity is giving something when you don't expect anything back. And also when you don't think anyone is watching, right? So like, I can't tell you how many people I've seen that's like, oh, I'm going to give this thing while everyone's watching. Like I'm going to hand them this when like 40 people behind me are watching. Like, I think like the ultimate there's a couple different ways of like generosity that I like really believe in. One is like giving stuff to people when they don't know who you are. There's no one around. And then the other one is giving stuff to people that they can gift to someone else so that they can understand like ultimate generosity. Now they get to experience it instead of like, hey, I'm giving this to you like as a gift and now I'm expecting something back. You give them a gift that they get to give to someone else. Like, I believe that like that's ultimate generosity.
Well, and it's taking the limelight off of you. And I'm completely in alignment with what you're saying, because I do a lot of things, and my husband and my family and we do a lot of things anonymously. And nobody needs to know what we're doing. We're not doing it for recognition. We're not doing it, to get the the reviews or the ratings, or you know what I mean? We're doing it because we've been blessed. We did not get to where we are in our business, in our life on our own. We always had people building us up. We always had people cheerleading for us and supporting us in the background. And we have that opportunity to give back now. And I don't ever want anybody to think of it as the wrong way. And so I do things anonymous. I rather do things anonymous because that's truly what we're doing. And being generous is not always about, okay, a couple dollars here. Sometimes it's actually, it stretches you, right? And
well, one of the things we were talking about, we had, I love that you're talking about it's not always monetary either, because we had a conversation with our team a couple mornings ago, and the team was sharing ways that they like to give back in the community. And one of the things that a team member said is, I haven't done it in a few months, but I make it a point to go into the grocery store and find the lady who you can tell she may be a little bit older. She dressed up and put her makeup on to go to the Publix grocery store. And I go tell her she looks amazing today. And I said, that's what it's about, right? Like that's awesome.
No, I love that.
Pay somebody's coffee in the Starbucks line or something. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big thing, but I mean, you could have impacted somebody's day in a way you have no idea. I mean, Renee, words go a long way like that. You know what I mean? It's just, you can see people sit up a little taller, stand up a little taller, and it's just about being kind. But I love your hashtag, so I'm going to have to incorporate that more too.
I appreciate that. I think, when you look at, I think when people hear giving back or generosity or anything like that, we instantly think money. Yeah. Like we instantly think money, and money's actually the one that lasts the least. Like a moment, like that conversation, Renee, that you just mentioned there, that lady might remember that for the rest of her life. Whereas if you gave her $10 and said, hey, I'd like to buy part of your groceries, she'll forget that by next week. Yeah. Right. So like the way that you make people feel, and the thing that I've always believed in is to positively impact everyone and everything that I come in contact with through generosity. Like by doing that, like everywhere you go, you're like, okay, like I'm going to leave this better than when I entered.
Right.
Okay. So let's dive into you, Kris. We could Google your name and there's endless news coverage. You are amazing at gaining PR and spreading the news of the good work of your, not only your giving back, but also your brokerage and the growth of your brokerage. By doing so, you really solidified a position in your community where you have a lot of fans. And then every once in a while, you might even have some of the naysayers. I know you've talked about this many times, but I'm sorry, I love the story. You actually had someone put up a billboard, right, to say Kris Lindahl must be stopped.
Yeah.
So talk about that and how you navigate that, because I see it as a huge compliment. I'm just saying, I think that's a compliment.
Thank you. No, there's two that come to mind recently. So there was a young gentleman that started a GoFundMe that was basically it would just call it an attack on me. Like, hey, like how big of an ego does this guy have to be able to put these billboards up? And it was I've never actually met him. But he raised money, and I give him a lot of credit, and he's got a lot of talent to be able to create that and generate money and get to that point of, and he had a lot of persistence of working with the billboard companies, which they rejected the creative because we're a client of theirs. But what we did is when I realized we could turn that into generosity. So what we did is we gave him a billboard. We let him put up what he wanted. And we took all the money and we donated it to people serving people. So we donated it to charity. So we gave him the billboard. We gave him the, he accomplished his goal. And I just wanted to teach him and others that like, hey, like he doesn't have any idea who I am. In a lot of cases, like when we see someone that looks or is in a certain place, we assume that it looks a lot different than it is if we've never been there. And I've seen this over and over again, even for myself. Like you'll meet someone, you'll think like, wow, like their world must look like this. But once you start having a conversation with them, it's way different than you thought it was. And I think that's a lot of what happens in our world. The other one is, and I thought he did an awesome job. I really did. I thought he did an awesome job.
Before you go into the next one, explain to me that he was raising money to put a billboard up against you.
Yeah. So he's not even in the industry or anything, but just a billboard with, it was our iconic pose, but it was him on there. And it was like, look at how long my arms are, something website. It was some website or something like that. And he raised the money.
You procured more business because of that.
What's that?
You procured more business and more PR and more press.
I mean, the more PR you have, the better it is, right? And so that's the thing is like, I'm fortunate that he did that because that helped our company. And I think it was also not only a learning moment for him, but for me and also everyone in the community of like how you can take something that looked like it was one way and turn it into a positive and like have like that happy ending to a story that could have went way different from like, he's like, hey, this guy is doing this. He must be this way. I mean, it was, if for anyone to read it, they would look at it as an attack. To me, I looked at it as an opportunity to create more awareness and more funds for a charitable organization. And so that was one recent one. The other one was a brewery that put up on their sign, Kris Lindahl must be stopped. Right. So that was outside a brewery. And it was pretty lighthearted. I thought it was great, you know, and I looked at all the attention it got on social media. We reached out to him. We were actually going to help them raise a lot of money for charity. And then they decided that they weren't interested in going that direction, but we were willing to really help them raise some awareness and for some charitable stuff. So anytime that someone does anything like that, I always try to turn that into a positive. You know, and throughout the years, I think that there's a couple of things that go with those stories. One is just the amount of investment that not only that I've done, but also our company in personal development and growth, that you can be okay when things are maybe not so kind that about you online and things are said those things, because I realized like, one, there's an opportunity to turn that into a positive, but in certain attacks, they're the ones that actually have the issue, not me. Right. And so I think too often though, that when we see bad things or someone comment about us, we always think that like, that's us. Like, and it takes a long time to get through that. And one of the biggest questions I always get is like, how do you handle like the naysayers and doubters? And like, how can you like read this stuff that you see on Twitter and Reddit and all these places and like actually even function? And I'm like, well, for one, I know that that's a reflection of who they are, not who I am. And the other part of it is that there's a different culture for every type of social media platform out there. And some of them, it's not really, they're hiding behind an alias. It's not really who they are, right? Like there's this environment that these different platforms have created. And to me, I worry about the day that I'm no longer being talked about on there, because that means that we're no longer relevant and we're no longer being noticed. And so I look at that as a positive, and I actually measure marketing campaigns based on the conversations that are happening on those platforms, because then I know we're making an impact. And the moment that they're no longer having those conversations, I worry, because that means we're no longer being effective.
Why I think it's so important that, and thank you for sharing with such transparency about it, but I think it's really important because for agents watching, for example, maybe they don't have a billboard and maybe they don't have someone putting up a billboard in their name to be oppositional. But one of the more day-to-day things that sometimes agents encounter is, well, someone put up a negative comment on my feed, or they put up something negative. And I think it's all scale. Even if it's a negative comment, or it could be something said about you negatively. What Elizabeth and I have spent a great deal of time talking with leaders on this show about is the leaders who show up, regardless of the circumstances. Leaders don't wait for the circumstances to be ideal to what they need or want to perform or to grow. Leaders show up in the current situation, adapt, learn, fall forward, and move forward, right? And so I think it's really important for people to realize is you had a couple choices there. You could have freaked out, buried your head in the sand and said, oh my gosh, someone put up a billboard about me that wasn't positive. But it's so indicative of the type of leader you are, because you showed up and you made a positive out of it.
I always, that is a couple of really good points. And one thing that I always try to think about when something happens is, what do they want me to do? What do they want me to do? And I always think through like, okay, they did this. What do they want me to do? Right. And so that's always the way that I look at it. What are they expecting me to do? Those are always things an exercise that I do quickly. And the other thing that you mentioned there is you also have to have the awareness to be looking for these opportunities. Yeah. Because they happen every day in front of everyone. And some people like succeed and others do nothing with it, with the same opportunities. And there's two parts. There's the act of listening and watching and seeing what's going on. And then the second part is the taking action quickly. Like there's two parts. Like you have to see it, which we do really well, but we take action faster than anyone else. And it's not 100% right all the time, but we move quick and we take action and we make decisions, which is what you need from leaders and organizations. Like the last thing that people want is a bunch of people sitting around with no one making decisions.
That's usually driven by allowing fear in the driver's seat, though. And
sure.
Fear is then what will prohibit people from moving forward. It's tough, I will say. I personally have grown a lot. I know Elizabeth and I started this show exactly for that reason. Is we woke up in mid-March and said, oh my goodness, we're going to be called to lead in a way we have no idea how to lead. No clue. So let's just show up and start having conversations because of people like you who are happy to share. We will all grow and learn together at a faster pace. But getting the fear out of the driver's seat, you are very good at. So do you have any tips on that?
Yeah,
how do you just ignore that?
Well, I mean, for me, it's like I look at everything as a positive. So what's the worst that can happen? Like the biggest challenge that I see in people navigating through life. I mean, we all have challenges. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying that it's been this easy road. I mean, I've faced a lot of adversity along the way, but the challenge that I always see in people is fear, but it's also projecting what we think onto others. So like, wow, if I do this, they're going to feel this way, or like, oh, I shouldn't say that because then they're going to give me this reaction. And the challenge that I always issue to people is like, well, how do you know if you've never done it? Like, how do you know it's going to show up that way if it's never happened? Like you see it all the time. Like, oh, I don't know I'm not sure if I can do it. Oh, what if we do that? And they say this, and I'm like, well, how do we know? We've never done it. Right. And so a lot of times what happens is like, and this is where like that self-talk and that courage and things that we have to go through in life is like, we have to be willing to bypass that fear and step through those uncomfortable moments, knowing that like, what is the worst thing that can happen? We've never tried it. And we go on this fact-finding mission and we try things and they're not always right, but we learn so much from it that it sets us up for even better opportunities in the future based on the experiences that we had, even if they weren't 100% positive. And so I think that's the thing that so many people are also seeing. People are seeing what it looks like today for Kris Lindahl Real Estate and the things that we've done and the things that we've accomplished. What they haven't seen is all of those difficult moments and all of those things that we've faced along the way that we've stepped through that haven't been perfect, that we've learned from, that now when people see like marketing ideas, PR, be generous, people, all these things, they see this thing that's like, wow, like I cannot believe that they are doing all this in that short amount of time. But what isn't visible is all of the mistakes and failures that we had along the way that led us to understanding more so than ever before how we implement things, how we roll things out, how we understand things, how we listen. There's all these things that we do now that look perfect. And I think this is what happens so much in life is we get discouraged because we see someone that runs a marathon in record time and we're like, I could never do that, but we don't even actually know what the preparation was. Yeah. Like we have no idea what the training was. We have no idea what went into it. And every one of those people started with putting one shoe on at a time, started with a quarter mile, then a half mile, then a mile, then 2 miles and 5 miles and 20 miles. Like, and so we get so caught up in looking at like what it looks like today that we end up in a spot where we're stuck in neutral and we never get started.
Well, it goes back to kind of what you said too. And I love your leadership style. I've never really had a chance to visit with you. And so when you talked about earlier when they did the billboard and you sat back and said, well, what are they expecting from me? How are they expecting me to react? Right. So they had that expectation and they think they know how you're going to react, kind of just like the example you just said. And then when you react in a completely different way, you shine a lot brighter. And people are watching all the time. Your team is watching, your community is watching, all these people are watching. And when you react in a way that wasn't expected, then it gives more credibility and you create more fans and you're like, oh my gosh, you're more real. I can relate to you a lot more. And so just like you broke it down, you don't know what you had to do take this race or win a marathon. And people think they know, right? They think they know that, oh, they've got it so easy and they don't really have to work so hard and their phone just rings. And then when you're actually being real and authentic and showing up, then they realize who you really are, and then they're fans for life. And that leadership cascades out to everyone else you're around, and not even just your team, but it's going to help your team grow in the long run by you just showing up and being who you are and the leader that you are. I love your style.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's, the thing that's so interesting about leadership is when people can't, when it's impossible for them to rattle you, and when it's impossible for them, this is how, you look all the way back through all of the great leaders, throughout history. It's the ones that when things got challenging, that they weren't rattled and that they were so certain that like, hey, we're on the right path, are the ones that always win. They're always the ones that win. And it's impossible for us to get rattled. Even you look at, 60 to 90 days ago from the steps that we took. And, we've added 5 leaders to our leadership team in 60 days. We have over 140 real estate agents coming in the next 60 days. All of these steps that we've taken, we've incorporated 3 new pillars into our business, and we've added all of these things in the past 2 to 3 months. Because when it first started, like the day that it really, I think things changed for most people was when the NCAA, the NBA, and Tom Hanks, when all of that happened in the same day, was the day that everything sort of shifted for most people. And immediately that day, we went to morning Zoom meetings every single day, including weekends, right? And so I said, we're going to get on Zoom every single day. Things are changing quickly. We're going to learn together. We're going to grow. And I canceled. I didn't cancel them all, but they were every speaking event, every travel event, every obligation I had around the country, everything was stopped, which I was totally okay with. And I just went all hands on deck in every single meeting with my company. And what the outcome of that was one of the most incredible things that's ever happened in our organization. I learned so much about what we were doing well, what we weren't doing so well, and things that needed to improve right away. And so we took action on all of these things that we learned, and we started hiring leaders in positions and areas where we weren't great, where we had some growing pains, and we grew quickly. And so we brought in leaders, mostly from outside the industry, that had experience in high volume brand-based system like ours. And they're already making a massive impact in our company in a short amount of time, because we went out and we got A+ players in sort of the perfect time to do it.
One of the things that, as we've asked each other how we are, there's that natural thing we do in our culture. I'm fine, right? And over the last 90 days, I was very cognizant when I was asked that question. There were a couple answers I would give. One is unbelievable, because I'm a huge Tom Hopkins fan, and he says unbelievable, it covers all bases. But the other thing is, when someone would say, how are you? I would say, well, there could be a lot of uncertainty, but what I do know is I'm growing. Mm-hmm. And I love to see that you've been in tune with and analyzing the last 90 days, because you've seen such tremendous growth. And growth doesn't necessarily mean production, although I know you're doing amazing with production, and transactionally, growth can be internal growth and growth as individuals, which makes our team stronger. I'm super happy to see that you put focus on that. Because we have a few more minutes of your time, and we're so grateful that you carved time out, I have a question for you. If we get tactical for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
You are a marketing genius, and I believe in success leaving clues. I follow you on social media on every single platform. So thank you for the clues that you leave, because I pay attention. I always have, as long as I've known you. Yeah. What are a few of your top social media tips for realtors right now to improve their business?
Yeah. So one is understand who follows you, right? So understand your people that you're connected to, and that, we have individual agents that are watching that might just be getting started, that have a smaller following. And we have people that operate teams and brokerages and have a huge following. But understanding who follows you is a super important part of it, because if you're just putting out nonsense all day long that doesn't relate to anyone, you're only going to get a few likes and only going to get a few views. And so there's a couple things you can do that are really easy to see if your messaging is meeting sort of the market where they're at. One is, if you post something and you have a lot of views on a video but no engagement, you have a problem. Like if you don't have any comments or likes and you have 1,000 views, something's not right. Something's not right if people aren't willing to engage. Now, that engagement could be a comment, could be a heart, a like, a care, whatever it may be, or it could be a private message, or it could be signing up on a website. There's different ways to do that. And if your videos aren't relating, they're not going to comment, they're not going to engage. And so in marketing, like if you have a message that doesn't meet the market where they're at, you're missing everything. Now, the algorithms have become so intuitive on social media that they already know if your message is going to meet people where they're at. They know because based on the actions that your audience is taking elsewhere on the platform. And so they're only going to show that thing to people that they think are going to watch it, click on it, comment on it, do all those things. So one thing that would be super helpful for everyone that hasn't done this is start asking people that follow you. Like, hey, are you seeing my stuff? Do you like it? What do you think? Like, what would be helpful? What should I post? What shouldn't I post? Like, what do you like? What don't you like? And I would ask. And I think having that mindset of being a student first is super critical in any marketing. If anyone that knows me well, every single place I go, I ask constant questions. Constant. Like, from what radio do you listen to? Is it streaming? Is it Alexa? Is it Google? What do you do in the car? Like, do you read? Do you listen to Audible? I'm constantly asking. And over the last 90 days, same thing. What behaviors have you changed? What have you kept the same? You're at home more often. What are you doing? What do you find? Are you watching the news? Are you watching Netflix? What are you like? Are you on social media? Where are you getting your news? Are you getting news? Like, I'm constantly asking a lot of questions about behaviors that tell me more about what people are doing and where they're headed. And so, because the metrics of social media, the metrics of, listening to radio and the way that they measure radio from all of those things are super inaccurate, right? I mean, the rating system is, everything's inaccurate. But if you just start using whatever your following is and start learning those things, odds are that they're not the only ones that are behaving and consuming that way. And as you learn more of that, then you start to invest more resources in the areas where people are spending their time and where they're doing things. And then if you get really good at it, they're also telling you what they want. So now you're not only spending more resources in the places where they're spending time, but now you're putting a message out that people are telling you they want. And so what happens then is what you put out becomes that message to market match because of the research that you did. And so being a constant researcher is so critical in marketing. And the challenge is, and this is where most people get stuck, is they don't think they have the resources. But when I started, I didn't have any resources, and I just used my free Facebook profile, right? And so like when you start, you don't actually, people think like, oh, you've got to go spend thousands of dollars on this and that and everything else. You don't actually need any money. All you need is you need to take initiative. You need to be willing to listen, and you have to take action and start asking those questions. And once you get that information, you have to do something with it. And the biggest challenge that almost every single realtor has is they don't ask. And second is they don't take action with anything they're learning, right? And so if you're out there wanting to be a student first, having all the knowledge and doing nothing with it is pointless. But being a student and gathering that information and then putting it out there is how you're going to make a huge impact in the world. And the problem that I've seen, there are very few people in real estate that operate from a curious state. They're not asking questions. I know because I spend time with a lot of them. They're not asking questions. Everywhere I went, I constantly questions, like, tell me more about this. Why do you do this? What is this? What does this look like? Even people that you think will provide zero value to you, I'm still asking questions. And actually, those are the ones that I learned the most from, the ones that I thought I would take nothing from. And so if I wouldn't have asked those questions and engaged, I wouldn't have learned any of that. And so I think having that constant learner mindset of really being a student first sets up all of those other things that you could do. I mean, even to the point right now that, I mean, I had a conversation with our company this morning, and I said, every single consumer that we come in contact with, they're going to go to all of your social media profiles and they're going to look at every single thing. And if you log out of your platforms and you look at what a consumer can see, if they can't see the company you work for, if they can't see certain things, they're not going to work with you. And I can't tell you how many real estate agent requests that I get on social media where I have no idea that they're a real estate agent.
They're secret agents. There's no clarity. Yeah.
I have no idea. So it's just interesting. And then what I also found too is by asking those questions, what I learned was how many people in our industry actually are open to helping. So many of them are open to helping. No one ever asks. No one ever asks. Like, it's amazing to me how many people are willing to mentor and help other agents execute and do things and eliminate the mistakes that they made, but no one actually ever reaches out to them. No one asks them. In a lot of cases, like, they're intimidated by someone that does a lot of production or has built a big business because they think that they can't relate to where they're at. But the reality is most people have been every step along the way if they built their company from the beginning as a solo agent to a team or a brokerage or wherever they're at today. And there's a lot of information that they'd be willing to share. The challenge is most people aren't asking.
Sometimes you just have to presume the answer is yes. So you have to ask the question. And it's funny you mentioned your morning meeting. This morning's meeting that I had with my team, that very topic was discussed about not only asking questions, but when possible to ask open-ended questions. And we had a lot of collaboration and communication this morning about we talk about earning relationships, right? And whether it's a customer or an online lead or wherever, it doesn't matter. Whatever your next door neighbor, we all have to earn the relationships of the people around us. And so those people like yourself, Kris, who ask questions are giving themselves more of an opportunity to understand who they are, as well as earn the relationship, which is what you're doing.
Well, and if you the ultimate is always going to be no anyway. Right?
Of course. I think the ultimate, like, the people that stand out to me the most are not the ones that talk the whole time. Like, the ones that stand out are the ones that ask sharp questions. I had a conversation yesterday with someone, and I got done and I told our leadership team, I'm like, that person's sharp. Like, I could just tell from the questions, not any of the information that was shared, just by the way that they asked questions. And I think that's what will, as I look at, and this isn't even specific to real estate anymore, but I look at the rooms and the people that I surround myself with now are because I asked good questions. Not because I came in trying to be the expert and word vomit all over everyone. It's because I was willing to ask the questions like, hey, like he might belong in like this area. And I just continued to grow and spend time with people that are doing incredible things in the world. And it's by asking and being a student first, it stands out far more than interjecting or coming into an organization or coming into a meeting or a mastermind or an event or whatever it may be, and just talking the whole time.
Well, okay. Before we go, we have one more. Elizabeth and I like to put our guest on the hot seat. We have one more question. I don't know if you
the hot seat already.
It's hot seat time. I don't know. I think you can handle it though, Kris.
Entire time, yeah.
What does leadership from the heart mean to you?
Leadership from the heart is when I look at organizations and I look at, there's a lot of organizations that are successful, just like you had mentioned earlier, in terms of production. But leadership from the heart is what keeps a community together, right? Whereas like when you look at just solo leadership, like leadership without any sort of emotional connection or human connection, or for example, even when the COVID thing first hit, we changed all of our billboards to talk about humanity, not business. Right. And we turned it into support local, and we started giving out our advertising to other small businesses that were in need. The difference in the companies that are at the highest level now are the ones that lead from an emotional heart standpoint versus just black and white robotic. I know someone in the Midwest. I won't name the team or the brokerage that is having a very difficult time with turnover because they manage their company like robots. They literally manage their company like robots. And it's just like, everything is so like robotic that no one wants to be a part of that. They want to be a part of like that humanity and like that heart and that emotional thing. And that also requires from a leader, when you're going to lead from the heart, that requires transparency and that requires you to be vulnerable. Like if you're not willing to do those two things and you say like, oh, like lead from the heart, lead with the heart, whatever it may be, and you're not willing to do that yourself, you're not actually leading anything from the heart. It's just a phrase. Like, unless you're willing to stand up and be vulnerable and share that raw emotion of like, whatever that may be or wherever things are at in the organization or in your personal life. That's the only way to me when I hear that phrase, that's the only way that it works is if you can be transparent and you can be vulnerable in front of others.
Pretty powerful words right there.
Yes.
Wow. Well, I have to say, Kris, is that, we first met years ago. And when you talked about people in the room, I have to say, both on behalf of Jeff and I, because we met you together, is you were a part of one of the first groups to ever show us what it meant to truly collaborate and to open up and learn from others and continue to give back on a professional basis. The fact that we adopted that and you were in that first group when we were going to Real Estate Webmasters conferences, it's changed the way we do business. It's changed our business. I mean, even Elizabeth and I starting this show was just about, there's no boundaries, there's no click funnels, there's no ask. We just wanted to share conversations with inspiring leaders and hope and know that we would be providing value to somebody for something wherever they're at in their journey. Yeah,
you're doing such a great job. And I'd have to add too, both of you are like really good at moderating this, like really good. And then if anyone that's watching like has questions for me or whatever, we have a LinkedIn page where, you can, we just have a redirect, which is connectwithkl.com, which is all my social platforms. I monitor all my messages. If anyone has questions or things where they're stuck or anything that I can help with, I'd love to.
That is so awesome. And, going back to saying yes and researching or saying no, thank you for saying yes to come on with us today and sharing your heart and your secrets to success, right? Which you're pretty much an open book. So yeah. I know that I speak on behalf of all of us when we say thank you.
No, you're welcome. It was an honor to spend time. And I got to see some of the questions over there. I know a lot of people are watching and I'm excited to hear that. Yeah. Where I always learn when I always learn in environments like this is I always learn from those that reach out. I really do. Like that tells me a lot about who's going to succeed and who's not. Are the ones that have that curious state that are like, hey, I've got a quick question. I've got this, I've got that. Like it's always, it tells me so much about people. It really does, about the ones that really want to ask questions, because you can spend an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours investing and watching and listening to these things. And if you never take action and you never actually are open to going to learn, it's just all a bunch of buzz. It means nothing. And the ones like, and Renee, like you had said, like the groups that we've been in, and if you look at the thing that the biggest differentiator in so many of these companies that are at the level that they're at today are the ones that continue to take action. Like they just take action.
And you talked, Kris, about, sometimes we don't realize what's really behind the curtain. And that really spoke to me because you may not realize, but when we first met at that time, Jeff and I think we were selling $6 to $8 million worth of real estate. And I don't remember where you were at, but it's the same. I look at you now and what have you helped 3,000 families in this year? You're on track, right? Yeah. Like we're nowhere near that, but I'll tell you what, when we first met you and looking at where we've grown to now, it's a completely different situation. And we would have never ended up here if it wasn't for the collaboration we get from all of the awesome leaders that we have. It's opening up and putting it all out on the table, not being afraid, because that old antiquated way of, I'm going to keep everything to myself. It's just, that's old. That's not how it works. Share, grow together.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about sharing is that you can make an impact on people and sometimes you never know it. That's what I love about it. Like I'll see people years down the road that we may have had a conversation with that we had no idea that we made an impact on that we find out later that we did. And there's also people on the other side that have made amazing impact in my life that had no idea of it. And one thing that I've always tried to do, and I've continued to get better at, is I let people know that have made a really big impact in my life that they have. And I think that's one thing that I would encourage everyone to say is, like, if you're feeling a certain way, or there is someone in life that has made a big impact, just share it with them. Like, it encourages more generosity. It feels good to actually compliment people. And I think you also have to give credit where credit's due when you have others that have really helped you grow along the way.
Yeah, we can get here on our own. And Kris, you are an inspiration. So we are so grateful for your time today and everything you're doing. I'm going to continue to watch and learn from you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, Kris.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep on being awesome and be generous.
Yes. And if we do anything for you, Kris, you know to reach out.
Sounds good. Thank you.